All right, folks, this is Marco Palmero, and in this video, I'm going to discuss a very important topic. I might actually get in trouble if the wrong people watch this, because I'm going to discuss the approach of M&A advisors in general, when it comes to finding deal flow, and why what they're doing might not necessarily be the best way to go about sourcing transactions. So I'll actually dig deeper into this with a story, because I think it's important to emphasize why I came up with this video and this kind of example to explain my strategy for finding deals. But before we do that, let's talk about how a lot of M&A advisors, private equity groups to some respect, even professionals, investment bankers that do deals, how do they source these types of transactions? Well, if we're talking about big size deals, most of it is done through referrals, their networks, their connections. But even if you go below the $100 million mark and you start to target small, medium-sized assets, a lot of firms still rely on their personal network, their connectivity, and sometimes the experience they collected over years to find deals, get their foot in the door, connect with business owners that might be interested in an exit, and so on and so forth. Now, that's all nice and good. If you have a strong network, you should definitely leverage it. If you have experience in certain industries and you know people, I'm not, by any means saying you shouldn't use those things. The problem is a lot of people rely on that too heavily. And in my opinion, that is because they're afraid of using alternative solutions, because they feel they might not be as effective, or maybe they fear they might lose their reputation if they kind of like go out on the offensive and try to source deals proactively instead of just having their network come to them or have deals happen naturally, so to speak. The problem is that relying exclusively on network references, experience, background isn't a predictable system to source transactions. And I don't care what a lot of people think. Many would say, well, I don't need these many deals in order to be successful in a year. Fine, but you're gonna need to grow your business, I guess. If you don't want to grow it, then why are you in the business in the first place? If you are in a bigger organization, you're going to need to produce results, quarter after quarter. So how are you actually trying to address that issue other than just waiting for your network to kick in and just waiting for other people to become interested, or just hoping that business owners will ultimately become motivated in selling and come to you naturally because you have all this experience and reputation in the market? I think, again, part of that is fear, and part of that is also egos that get involved. So there is a reluctance towards going on the offensive and try to source deals proactively, which is something that I can understand partially, because a lot of people don't want to hurt their reputation. But there are ways to work around that. There might be solutions where you are not the one putting your name out there in the first place until a deal is identified and then brought to you. I'm going to record a separate video on this. But the point I want to get across here is network and references alone are not enough. And if you are an advisor, investment banker, or someone else, you know that, and you realize that, implicitly. Maybe you don't want to admit that, but you know that is the case. Of course, if you are, KKR, no worry at all. You can close this video and go do something else. You're going to have more than enough references to, be successful and do a lot of deals. But if you are a small private equity group, an investment banking firm, or an M&A firm that maybe targets, deals 20, 30, 50 million, you need to use alternative solutions to source transactions. And we have found, we have realized over time that just a bunch of people use these strategies, and those are the ones that generally get the most deals overall. Now, I'm going to share what has worked for me clients we work with across the globe, across sectors. So you can potentially take some of these insights and deploy them into your business and use these solutions to create a better funnel for sourcing transactions that can ultimately deliver more opportunities. It's more predictable and is also freeing up part of your time so that you can allocate these resources towards closing the deals instead of finding them. So let's dig into that, and let's talk about a story that I actually want to share with you. I was having a conversation with a M&A firm, actually sourcing agents that were basically doing something similar to what we do, identifying transactions, finding deals, and they were using a very balanced funnel that was relying on their own references, their own historical track record, and also call outbound. So they had a few people in the team, generally the most experienced one, that were doing called outbound to businesses that might have been a fit. They were doing calls to people they felt could be interested in a sale, and they were leveraging their expertise, their connections, and their knowledge to get their foot in the door through these calls. And that, of course, delivered very good results for them and their clients because they had a referral funnel that was coming in and also their outbound system through calls. However, what we were discussing during that meeting was the fact that they were kind of capped, right? Because, okay, the reference part was coming in every once in a while, but the call part of the funnel was actually limited to the amount of calls they could make every single day. And if there were just 5 of them, if I remember correctly, that was of course limited to all 5 of them being on their desk making the calls. If something happened for whatever reason and they could not make calls, the results were ultimately slowing down because the volume wasn't there anymore. Now, to be fair, they didn't need that much volume in order to accomplish good results because their reputation and their relevance in the market was enabling them to get good outcomes, right? Get good prospects through the door. But the reason why we were having the call was because they were looking to get more and kind of like do something better. And so they were thinking about, okay, why don't we do more of the same, right? Why don't we scale our team and just bring in more representatives that might have similar track record, good networks they can leverage to then call people and find these deals on behalf of our clients. And they were all considering these different options. But as we dig deeper into the conversation, I started suggesting them a little bit of a different approach that has worked for us very, very well. And, they kind of like looked at it very openly, and I feel that piece of insight actually helped them in potentially fixing some of the things that, in my opinion, they were not doing so well. Now, what did I say to them? Well, I wanted all of them to look at their business as kind of like a machine that if they are not there, is not basically working. It is not producing results, it's not producing leads, because if they were, for whatever reason, stuck into another situation, managing a deal, trying to close a transaction, they weren't actually on the phones banging people to get leads through the door. So that created a huge issue for them. And yes, they could scale people to solve that, but it would be very expensive and time consuming because it needs training and requires the right people to be done properly. Well, instead, all they were missing was adding maybe other channels to the system to build a funnel that was actually more predictable in nature and could take some of these burdens off their shoulders. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in a second. The funnels that have worked best for us historically when it comes to sourcing deals in any sector, in any geography, it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter the type of deal that you're finding. Of course, it works particularly well for deals below 75 million in enterprise value, but it works for deals above that as well. The best solution that we have identified over time is omnichannel waterfall methodology. And what I mean by that is actually quite simple. We want to create a funnel where we start reaching out to prospects through the systems or channels that enable us to do good amounts of output without us necessarily being there. I'm thinking emails, I'm thinking SMS, I'm thinking social media partially, I'm thinking letters, I'm thinking all these different tools that you can leverage to get people to reply to you if you craft your messaging properly. These channels are, in my opinion, what should be kind of like your top of the funnel, or at least if we talk about the top of the funnel as a whole, they should be the first channels that you leverage to get people and find motivated sellers. Couple of reasons for that. As I said, they are less time consuming. They don't necessarily require you to be there all the time. They can be done one time and then set up to work on their own. They require minimum management, and also they can bring in a lot of the yeses and the nos that you would have got anyways if you were to do calls, but now you saved yourself 2-3 hours worth of calling because you just set up these campaigns and you got these yeses and nos anyways. So the problem that we're trying to solve here is the time issue and juggling between multiple tasks. If we create a system where the initial channels of outreach or the initial channels for generating leads are to some respect automated, we can then get a good feedback from the market already and then trim down the list of prospects that we wanted to connect with and end up with a limited amount of people then that we can then call or that we can then interact with in a more direct manner using our own unit of time. The point here is we're not necessarily sacrificing quality or efficacy. What we're doing is try to maximize every channel so that we can get deals across without being there all the time. And I feel a lot of them, when we were having this conversation, we're afraid of the fact that most of these channels like email, letter and stuff were not super personalized, and as a consequence they would not enable them to get that good of a result out of the campaigns. But the problem is they weren't realizing that it is not supposed to, all channels are not supposed to deliver the same outcomes, right? You might be more than fine having an email campaign that is set up and that has a good personalization, but not crazy personalization like a one-on-one call might have. And that is giving you 3% reply rate of motivated prospects within a certain industry. You might be more than fine with that, right? You might have, 10 or 15 leads coming in every week. More than happy to get those. You might also get a bunch of no's that you can filter out. You're never going to have to call these people. And at the same time, you can then filter all the no replies, so to speak, into an additional channel. That might be a social media campaign, might be a letter campaign, might be an SMS campaign. And keep doing this over and over again. Keep working this list and touch people on different channels so that, one, you can trim the list down. So at the end of it, you have saved time, and then you can make, your manual output. But you're going to know a couple different things. First, that you're calling people that 100% are not going to reply on an alternative channel. And two, you're going to have the other outputs that you did as reference when you call to say, to kind of have a hook and put a foot in the door. Because if you send a personalized letter to a person, and then you call them, you say, okay, I'm calling about the letter that I sent a week ago. Did you get it by any chance? It's much easier and much better icebreaker than just calling out of the blue saying, would you be interested in selling? Same degree, you can call about the email that you send out or the text that you send out. All these things kind of create a funnel that is more organized and that is reducing the amount of time that you need to put into the activity itself. And again, I'm not saying that calls should be removed or the network and all these things should not be considered when finding DealFlow, if you're an advisor, an M&A firm or whatever. But we also know that when finding deals and when doing deals, closing the transaction is what actually matters. And if you spend 90% of your time sourcing the thing, calling people to find business owners, you're not gonna have much time left to negotiate and close with your clients or with your investors, whatever. So why don't we avoid all that and we create a system where you have automated channels that run for you, that filter people out, and then at the end of it, bring you a list of all people that didn't reply to any of these efforts that you can call directly. That creates two separate lists, the ones that were ready to take action, or maybe that were ready to move forward when you contacted them, and others that didn't reply. And so now you can call these, or maybe use your personal network to see if you can get a foot in the door. Again, many different reasons why I feel people don't leverage this strategy, and hopefully the guys that I had a conversation with started to implement some of these additional channels. The first reason is I feel a lot of them feel the efficacy of it is not justified. That's total crap. That's not true. If you know what you're doing, these channels can deliver results. As a matter of fact, they can find you motivated sellers that might not reply to calls or network or whatever, simply because that's not their preferred channel of communication. Now you're reaching out through another medium, they're going to be more keen to have a conversation with you. Then there's the point about wanting to stick to one channel only, which is totally wrong in my opinion. And to some respect, there might also be the problem that they don't know how to set up all these things, and maybe that was what was working for them in the past. They used that and they kept doing what they were doing. But that's why I exist. That's why people like us do a lot of sourcing globally, or help people build their sourcing system so that they can then run it on autopilot. Because once you have these things nailed down, then you have multiple resources that are bringing you deals predictably, and you don't need to change anything of what you're doing. But what you're going to realize is that you have more free time you can allocate towards closing the deals, or you can allocate towards making more of the output that you're currently making. And at the same time, you're going to get more results in. So it's a positive loop that is created that ultimately gets you more motivated sellers, independently of whether you want to buy them for yourself, buy them for your clients, source deals to then provide them to a third party. All that applies if you build a multi-channel, kind of omni-channel outreach system that then filters people and kind of like prevents you from wasting valuable time doing outreach to people that would have replied to you positively or negatively in other circumstances, or in other channels. So again, if you feel that, the network part of it, or maybe the time that you're putting in sourcing deals is too much and things are not working the way you would like, chances are you need to implement a strategy that is more comprehensive, that generates prospects through multiple channels. And that's all we do. If you're interested in it, check the link below. There are going to be resources that you can access to book a time with us and see if we can help you in some way, shape, matter, or form. But the point is, if you're struggling with that, simply implementing new channels can already help you a lot. Of course, how you implement them and how you integrate them plays a huge part. So you need to have some knowledge of how to integrate these systems together so that the leads can overflow into one another. You're not reaching out to a person in two different channels at the same time, because you're going to sound weird. You got to build the system to work and function in a very consistent way. That's what we do. But as a start, you can try and test different channels and see how they function for you, if they can take some of the burden off your shoulders. And then if you feel that can add value to you, then consider working maybe with someone like us that can help you build these infrastructure correctly, or just source the deals on your own if that's what you're looking for. But long story short, multi-channel waterfall methodology is what works best. And there are a lot of other things that I want to cover, but that's not the video for this. Again, if you feel that as an advisor, as an M&A person, as a private equity group, references in your network are enough, or calls are just the only way to find motivated sellers, you're wrong. There are better ways to go about it if you combine multiple channels together. Try that out, see how it works, and I will see you in the next one.